All right, hello everyone. This is Hannah DeWitt again, your instructor, here to give you another pre-recorded lecture. This time we're talking about cinema and the digital arts. You know the drill by now. This is based off of Preeble's art forms and inspired by my cohort Erica Lewis, link in the description. So, as an introduction to cinema and digital arts, let's look at one example first. Here's Circles by Oscar Fischinger. This was the first ever experimental color film, and it was actually screened under the pretenses of being an advertisement during the suppressive Nazi regime in which any modern art, or especially experimental art, was strictly forbidden. So it was very bold of them to screen this. And just talking about cinema in general, cinema is a mass art closely monitored by those in authority, as you can see based on the Nazi regime monitoring cinema. Also, creative people have been making experimental films for generations. So, what is cinema? Oh, and today we're going to be talking about cinema, but we're also going to be talking about just digital arts in general. But let's start with cinema. So, cinema is the production of movies as an art or an industry. It's the logical extension of photography, and it's basically an illusion of motion made possible by the persistence of vision. Seeing lots of still images over a quick amount of time makes us able to connect the dots and see it as a moving image in our minds. The birth of cinema was actually so that someone could win a bet. It was Edward Muybridge, specifically, who commissioned a photographer to capture a horse's legs to settle a bet against Leland Stanford. It doesn't really matter who he was betting against, but basically he said, I bet you that there is some point when a horse runs where all of its hooves are off the ground. And he said, no way. And they were like, how are you even going to prove that? So they set up a series of cameras to take images in rapid succession of a horse as it runs, and then put all of those images together. And this actually ended up accidentally making the first ever film. It's called The Horse in Motion, and it proved Stanford correct. Wait, actually, okay. Muybridge lost the bet. He paid the commissioner and he lost the bet. I thought all these years that he won the bet, and it just clicked. Anyway, he lost a bet and movies were invented. This documentation was improved in the future by faster exposure mechanisms, but the actual device used to show this animated horse running is called a zoopraxiscope, and I've inserted an image of it here below the image of the horse running, or images of the horse running, and it's the first primitive cinema. I put that in quotes just because I think that word is kind of a yikes, but that's what the book wanted me to call it. So now that we know what the first cinema was, let's talk about just early cinema in general. So film is how it all started. The first practical film camera was invented in 1891, and it used a long strip of film, and it was electrically motor fed through a camera at 16 frames per second. So it was a little bit choppier than images or movies that you would see nowadays. Cinema was a popular entertainment medium by the 1890s, right when that came out. Short movies were popular, usually less than 10 minutes long, but few accepted cinema as an art form. Most only saw it as a form of entertainment, and they thought that it wasn't artful because they thought the film camera seemed more like a mere recording device and didn't really think into how much artistic creativity could go into what one chooses to record with the device. Lo and behold, it's totally seen as an art form today, just like photography. Early filmmakers tried to make movies look like filmed theatrical performances, and also early films were silent projections. We all know about silent movies. Well, they weren't able to connect the audio to the movie yet, so they would normally just have movies be silent and then set them to music to make it, a little bit more entertaining. But any dialogue was actually written as little title screens in between shots instead of anyone actually being able to say it out loud. So the power of cinema comes from an ability to reconstruct time. Film is uninhibited by clock time, like our normal day-to-day life is. Scenes can be made shorter or longer and intentionally constructed to represent how we feel about time rather than being bound to reality. So something that's meant to be incredibly boring could be a scene that drags out way longer than that action would actually be in real life. Or something that's super fast and exciting could be sped up. Or something that's fast and exciting but you need to see it slower to see the detail could be in slow motion. Whatever you put in the film, it becomes the new believable reality because people are able to suspend their disbelief for the amount of time that they're watching the film. And cinematography itself is the art of photography and camera work in filmmaking. So first, let's look at a few firsts. It's a new art form. A lot of people were the first to do something in it. So Georges Méliès pioneered the idea of dissolves between scenes, when a scene kind of fades out and into the next one. And this was in his most popular film, especially A Voyage to the Moon, in which astronauts find a culture on the moon. I guess one of the first ever sci-fi films. D.W. Griffith suggested moving the camera from a stage-bound position. So actually moving it around instead of having it be all locked in one spot was started by Griffith. He also started film editing. At this time, it meant literally cutting apart the film and gluing it back together. Nowadays, you can do it all on a computer. But it was started with D.W. Griffith, and in that, the editor selects the best shots from raw footage and reassembles them into meaningful sequences, so you don't have to do everything in one perfect tape. He also used a technique called parallel editing and also was the first to do close-up shots and long shots. I think that this just is because he was the first to actually move the camera around. So, of course, he was the first to do these different shots. But, we'll give him credit for it. Now, Sergei Einstein further developed Griffith's techniques, but then kind of built on them. And he used montages and kind of invented montage as a sort of method of storytelling. And a montage, if you don't know, is basically just combining a number of brief shots to represent distinct but related subject matter. So if you've ever seen like a montage of someone painting a room and like there's like some clips of them painting it and some clips of them like wiping the sweat off their forehead and some clips of them like refilling their paint bucket, but all together it's them painting a room, and then at the end of the 20 seconds the room is just painted. That's a montage. A piece by Sergei Einstein, or a movie film that he created he's especially popular for, is the Battleship Potemkin, which is a realistic portrayal of a real-life tragedy, and it includes close-ups and long shots again, but they gave the audience a real sense of the fear and tragedy in this. It was very highly emotional. Now, a film that we are definitely going to watch in class unless we somehow run out of time, but I think this is going to be the first one that we put on our list of wacky little films to watch in class, is Unchan and Lou. Everyone in art school has to watch Unchan and Lou, and by the end of art school, you learn how to pronounce it. It is a Dali film. Salvador Dali and Luis Bueno worked together on it in particular, and it is a very famous, very influential French surrealist film. It was silent with musical accompaniment, like most films at the time, or all films at the time. And it is just, it's literally surrealist. It's just completely bizarre. It's a sequence of seemingly irrational events, and there's an overall theme of unrealized sexual desire. And it also inspired the hallucinogenic feel of later music videos in the 60s and 70s. A lot of this just very trippy, seemingly non sequitur, we're going to watch it in class, and you can tell me all your thoughts about that after that. And there is one scene that is scary, so I'll warn you when that one's about to come up, so you can look away if you have to. But we're definitely watching Unchan and Lou. Now we're going from the Talkies to the 70s. So after they figured out how to line up audio with video and no longer needed silent films, they called them Talkies. And most of these were produced in Hollywood. This was the production site for the vast majority of the world's movies in the 1930s and till this day, honestly. I mean, movies are made all around the world, but Hollywood is just known for it. Also, around this time was the invention, or I guess conception, of the Motion Picture Production Code, which was an attempt to regulate moral content of film. Gone with the Wind actually got fined $5,000 for their very, very iconic line, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." This is the same reason that, like, I Dream of Jeannie had to have her belly button covered. Like, it's just, there's all kinds of random rules that you had to pass, and films that lacked MPPCA approval had no chance of wide distribution, so you really just had to do whatever they said. Now, one thing that you could spend an entire class learning about and an entire lifetime trying to do is animation, and I don't think we really have time to fully give it the just honor it deserves, but let's cover it real quick. So animation is, at its roots, hand-drawn frames photographed and projected in sequence. Nowadays, you can do a lot more elaborate and effective digital forms of animation where you don't have to draw everything frame by frame, but this was how it started. Disney was the first to create a feature-length movie of animation. It was Fantasia in 1940. And also, animation is planned out through the form of storyboards, which is a series of drawings or paintings arranged in sequence. And they were normally 24 frames per second. That is because the goal is to give the illusion of movement as well as thinking and feeling, and that's how quickly the frames need to go for your brain to not think it's too choppy and weird to process. Now, the example I have here is it is a Walt Disney animation, but it's not Fantasia. It's a collaboration Walt Disney had with Salvador Dali called Destino. And at the bottom, I have a screenshot from the actual animated film. And then at the top, I've got some of the concept art, and I've got an example of what a storyboard looks like. So this was one of Salvador Dali's storyboards for this film. Another movement to know about is film noir. It was very moody, brooding black and white films, usually dealing with murder. They were very popular in 1940s Hollywood, and they basically showed the dark side of the American dream. The example I have here is Detour by Edgar G. Ulmer. And in this one, very predictably for a film noir movie, the main character ends up a murder suspect. Basically just romance and murder and black and white. That's pretty much all you need to know about film noir. I mean, you could learn a lot more about it, but that's what you need to know to get the main point. There were some very successful and influential films from foreign directors as well. Akira Kurosawa was a Japanese director who adapted European plays and stories through his own vision and put them through the lens of his own culture. So this example is Throne of Blood, which retells Macbeth, but in an ancient Japanese setting. And Western directors have actually adapted his films and remade them in their own way. So it's kind of like him adapting it from the West and then the West adapting it from him and going back and forth, and just a little trade-off there. Now, the juicy stuff, experimental cinema. By the 1960s, artists who made movies considered the idea of working in a more underground way. There was the main production movies in Hollywood, and then there was the artistic scene underground. And there was this real separation between artists and directors at the time. So an example of an experimental cinema director is Stan Brakhage. He was a very early leader in the underground cinema movement, and he began painting directly on raw film and then scratching through it. So you're quite literally seeing the marks that he made with his own hand on the film. He also filmed The Birth of a Child in 1959, and that was subject matter that was forbidden by production code and was banned from being shown publicly, but it was passed around in underground circles. And his most famous movie is Dog Star Man, which we have a still from here, and you can see how he's messing with the film itself. Now, another piece of experimental cinema that is wonderful. It's on our list of things to watch. Depending on where it is on the list and whether or not we run out of time, I hope we get to it, because I've only really dedicated one day in the syllabus to watching these films, but it's so worth it. If we don't get to it, you need to watch it. This is Scorpio Rising by Kenneth Anger. It was a very experimental film, but it definitely influenced mainstream films. And it catalogs the rituals of a particular Brooklyn motorcycle gang. And it actually kind of started the whole biker movie genre. Also, it's incredibly homoerotic the entire time. And for some reason, the book didn't want me to tell you that it's homoerotic, even though that's a very important theme in the film. The first time I saw this film was in a feminism and queer theory course. So I don't know why the book was yeah, tell them about this experimental film, but didn't say anything about how gay it was. So, Preebles, I'm coming for you for that one. But, I need to stop making jokes. I'm not funny. The 70s, we've gotten to the 70s. So, in the late 1960s, there was a decline of the production code. It still existed, but it's not as mandatory, and they became a bit more lax. And at the same time, directors started really rethinking old genres, like in The Long Goodbye by Robert Ottman, which a screen grab is featured here. Also in the 70s, there was the Blaxploitation movement, which is literally what they called it when studios started employing African-American directors and actors. They literally called it the Blaxploitation movement because they're exploiting Black people, and realized that actually they make amazing content that white people love and that they could make lots of money off of these people. So they continued to exploit them. Anyway, this example is Shaft by Gordon Parks. And this especially proved very successful with white audiences as well. And it showed a sort of in and out of the gritty urban life of Harlem with a new clarity that people who didn't actually live in downtown Harlem wouldn't have been able to experience or understand. Now let's get into special effects. Special effects merge old techniques with the new technology of computers. A lot of it was pioneered by George Lucas and Lucasfilm Ltd. So George Lucas is responsible for Star Wars, but also created this Lucasfilm Ltd. Group that was just the have-all, end-all of, if you wanted your film to have really cool special effects, you had to come to them and work with them. And they really worked with computers more than anyone else. They increased the use of computers in editing. And someone who did work with them and made something truly amazing is Guillermo del Toro. Here's a screen grab from Pan's Labyrinth. I highly recommend this film. Also, we looked earlier at some of Guillermo del Toro's sketches for Pan's Labyrinth when we were looking at examples of sketchbooks. So this is a Spanish-American production, and it details a lot of the stuff that happens in the, quote, real world in this movie has to do with, Spanish fascism. But then there's this really rich, elaborate fantasy world as well. So there's this intersection of fantasy and reality. And it exhibits this idea of imagination helping us cope with adversity. So this young child is going through so much, and her brain kind of opens up this whole door to a world in which she could be a princess. But it is definitely a fairy tale for adults. Some of the scenes are quite alarming, like this creature here. He's not featured in his most terrifying form, which is when he has his little hands up and his eyes are in his hands. You might have seen that image. But everything about the monster design of this creature is amazingly terrifying. So definitely watch Pan's Labyrinth if you get a chance. Now, talking a bit more about special effects, oftentimes shortened to SFX when written. Special effects are a shift from traditional film to digital cinematography that was nearly complete by this time. Rainbow in 1996 was the first all-digital feature-length movie, and it had digital files that actually had to be converted for theaters to be able to play them. Also, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace in 1999 was the first to combine film and digital cinematography, and strongly influenced the adoption of digital projection equipment in theaters. So the reason why projectors aren't literally playing roles of film to this day is because of Star Wars and George Lucas. Now, this evolution to digital has important implications. Special effects can draw audience interest in a way that a movie without special effects just can't. And also, it's facilitated by the speed of the digital production. The faster the digital production, the faster you can have uniform worldwide distribution. For example, this is a screen grab from Prometheus by Ridley Scott, and it was shot using multiple digital cameras, and it opened in 49 countries over a 10-day period. And also, the scenes seamlessly blend human actors with digital animation. And another popular form of digital animation that I'm pretty sure we've all seen examples of this. You see someone like wearing that weird little suit with all the dots on it. This is a different version of that, but this is motion capture, where actors wear special suits so that their motions are recorded and plotted to 3D software for animation. Most of the suits you see have like little dots all over them, but this one I guess is just kind of modern looking. And the latest technical innovation in cinema is actual virtual reality. Movies will either be animated or shot live with three-dimensional cameras, and viewers can wear headsets to see the action in panorama. And many of these are actually viewable on smartphones, so it's more accessible than ever. A good example of this is Hard World for Small Things by Janzica Bravo, which puts the viewer in a backseat of a convertible as it drives through South Central Los Angeles. So it's really just kind of showing off what you can do with virtual reality, and making it make sense that you're kind of in a stationary place because you can't move around when you're in a car, but you can look around. Now let's get into video art. We're getting into stuff that's a little bit more juicy, a little bit more just for art's sake and not necessarily for entertainment. So there are some unique characteristics of video that people can capitalize off of in video art. You get instant feedback when you're able to watch video back. At the time, cassettes were super inexpensive and they had plenty of storage in terms of what video files you could keep. I mean, they weren't called files when they were on cassettes, but things could be erased and re-recorded very easily. Early videos were very simple. No editing was really possible, and also black and white images were incompatible with color television broadcasts, so it wasn't really ideal to show on television. Instead, the medium was best suited for private screenings for small groups, so it became this kind of tight-knit underground community of people that would watch video art installations. A very famous example of this is Video Flag Z by Namjoon Paik. And this is basically just 84 television screens that are set together and they resemble an American flag, but old Hollywood films flicker across the screens. And actually lots of things have referenced this over the years. Like if you see a bunch of little old TV monitors stacked on top of each other in something, they're definitely referencing Video Flag Z. Digital video art is a little bit providing more freedom because you're not stuck to what you can keep on a cassette. You can edit things. New technologies like flat screens and DVDs are coming out. The line between video art and cinematography starts to get blurred. This screenshot here is from Cremaster Cycle by Matthew Barney, and this is another one that I hope we have time to watch in class. I mean, we wouldn't have time to watch the whole thing, but like at least some parts of it. but it comes in 3 parts, and it's just elaborately symbolic in the storylines. And the apprentice, who's the main character, basically passes through obstacles as they climb up the sort of spiral rotunda at the Guggenheim Museum. If you've ever seen the Guggenheim Museum, it's a very famous art museum in New York, and it is basically a large spiral, not staircase, but like slope that you walk up. And this film takes place in the Guggenheim, and he's walking and crawling up this huge spiral as he faces all of these different obstacles. And it's very just otherworldly and creative and super influential as well. So I hope we get time to watch at least a little bit of it in class. Now, people also do digital video art. Many artists combine digital video with other art forms, or bring it to the gallery in a way that makes it kind of function as an art piece like a stationary painting would. The example we have here is Science, Fiction by Diana Thader. But this is a combination of video art and also installation art. And also, as you can see in the background, she also uses light as a medium. I mean, one could argue that you're using light as a medium the entire time when you're using video art, but quite literally working with the lights in the space to create a strange sensation when you walk through it. Now let's get into the more broad range of just digital art forms. This isn't necessarily video-based, although some of them are. There's a whole range of computer-linked equipment that people can use in art, either to create finished works themselves, to generate ideas for other media, or just to solve design problems along the way. But basically, the main thing to note about digital art forms is that the barriers between traditional and digital manipulation are eroding. There's not really a barrier anymore. People just pass back and forth. So here's an example. This is Parcours by Vera Molnar, and it was made in 1976. And it was a very early effort in using a computer to program an image by making the computer actually plot the lines itself. So this image was created by a computer, and that was kind of new at the time. Now we've got AIs that could make anything that you possibly want as long as you feed it some examples. But at the time, this was, very new and exciting. Another example of just the broad range of digital art, this is by Raphael Lorenzo Hemmer. And this actually engages viewers directly in the creative process because they can control it. This piece is called Vectorial Elevation, and viewers can program this array of searchlights either locally or via website from their own home. So the artist shared the responsibility of creation with the viewer in the fact that they really had no control over what direction the viewer chooses to point these searchlights in. So it's a truly interactive piece, and it was kind of early in the interactive art scene. Now, a lot of digital artists can take advantage of computers' ability to process massive amounts of data in ways that humans can't. So here's an example by Casey Reese. This is called Today's Ideology. It was in 2015, and she had different ones for different days. The video screen connected to a database of that day's worth of photos from the New York Times. So all of the photos that the New York Times published that day would be mashed together into this image here where you can't really tell what they are, but it's fed from today's news. So it really challenges viewers to look at contemporary events through an abstract lens and creates these strange little relics of each day where you can't really tell what the content was that created it, but you know that it was specifically, like this one was specifically from July 26th of 2015. Now, someone who also works with the fact that you can feed computers a lot more information than you can feed a human is actually a local artist who teaches here at U of L, and her name is Tiffany Calvert. We talked about her husband in the last video, and now we're going to talk about her. She's brilliant. She's my faculty mentor. Thank you, Tiffany. But she she creates these amazing still life paintings. There's this series, and works in her series of this, used an artificial intelligence called StyleGAN, and she trained it on 1,007 images of historical still life paintings, and then she has the AI make a still life painting based on all of the still life paintings that she fed it, and prints that as a large inkjet printed image. And then Calvert then paints over these images using masking techniques and oil paint. So she's heavily inspired by Dutch Vanitas paintings, and in this she's really melding the traditional with the highly modern, like taking a very long-standing tradition, not only of oil paint itself or still life, but also like Dutch Vanitas still life paintings in particular. And then she's mixing it with this really, really modern technology of AI. And she creates these wonderfully little glitchy, I mean, they're not little, they're huge. But she creates these wonderfully glitchy oil paintings, and they're wonderful. So, and we're lucky enough to have her as an instructor. If you take a painting class, look at who's teaching it and try to find one by her. Or, you know, I'm sure the other painting instructors are great, but she's the one that I know. So, yeah, we're lucky to have her here. Anyway, getting into digital arts still a little further, let's talk about Lynn Hirschmann. We're going to look at a few pieces of hers because honestly, she's just amazing. So she confronts the issue of digital simulation. This example is called Dinah, and she quite literally made a cyborg. It's a video cyborg that is able to animate the facial gestures that it takes to say things, and has a voice that can say things kind of like Siri can nowadays, but it was earlier than that. And also it has an animated face that says it alongside that. And Dinah is running for the imaginary office of telepresident. And if you ask her a question, she actually searches the internet in real time and gives you a customized answer based on whatever you asked her. So she's really developing this idea of the cyborg in art. And some of her work, some galleries really didn't want to feature it because they were like, this is a piece of technology, not a piece of art. And I think that that is exactly what she's going for. She's bending the rules or blurring the lines between technology and art. Some other works by Lynn Hirschmann where she explores the human-tech interface are, there's Lorna of 1984, in which she actually allowed viewers to intervene in the character's life. This actually came out in 1983, not 1984, but anyway, it allowed viewers to interact with it. And that's something that we can do nowadays. I mean, like Bandersnatch on Netflix, or like any form of, I mean, even like in like the 2010s, there was special features on DVDs where you could use your remote to interact. But this was really early to be doing that, and really elaborate ways of interacting with the character as well. She also has this film, Technolust. It has Tilda Swinton in it, as you can see, and it's basically about a biogeneticist that downloads her DNA to a computer and makes clones of herself. But then she starts to realize that she can't really control them, and also they're connected to the internet in ways that she didn't realize. Like one of them is fed like romance movie lines and stuff, and so they're all influenced by the way that they are from the computer and from the internet. Now, I've got two more to add that weren't in the book, but I think that they fit, and I think that they're great. This is Jillian Meyer. This is a still from I Am Your Grandma. But Jillian Meyer, she doesn't always work in this format. She also makes like sculptures and installations and stuff. But some of the stuff that she's most famous for are these kind of like meme-like short videos. I'll show you one or two of them in class because they're quite short. But she uses the ephemerality of meme culture to express postmodern ideas about human relationships with technology. So in I Am Your Grandma, it's a very short, clickable video that initially reads as a meme, but as you actually kind of process what she's saying, it reveals deeper contemplation into how humans will relate to one another in the future based on changes in technology. She's got another one. I mean, she's got plenty, but another one I'm mentioning is Mega Upload. And this is a fictional tutorial on how to upload your soul to the cloud, reflecting on how real life seems underrated when the internet provides eternity instead. Like, if things you do in real life will be forgotten, what's the point of living offline? And it's actually part of a larger series of shorts titled #postmodem instead of postmodern. So yeah, that's cool. And then last but not least, I'd like to talk for a minute about Poppy. Poppy is an internet persona, a work of performance art, a cryptid, one might say. She worked with the creative director Titanic Sinclair to create hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of short experimental videos on YouTube. And she existed as an internet mystery for years before her identity was made public. And now it's pretty clear, like, anyone can figure out what her real name is and, like, what the story is. But for a long time, people had no idea, and we're trying to figure it out. She's a bit of a controversial figure because it's come to light in recent years that her persona is intentionally replicating a former creative partner of Sinclair's, Mars Argo, as a means to further torment her after she escaped Titanic Sinclair's abuse. Since these allegations, Poppy has also come forward about Titanic Sinclair's abuse and now works independently from him, focusing on her music and no longer emulating Mars Argo. But that is something important to note. For a long time, no one even knew that Mars Argo was the main influence for all of this. But luckily, they have both left Titanic Sinclair and are doing their own thing. Mars Argo doesn't really make her content public. She's a bit private after everything that happened. But Poppy's definitely doing her own thing. Despite all of this, the artwork itself is quite interesting in the fact that it managed to captivate a confused yet devoted audience for literally years, followed by a web of theories and videos trying to explain the mystery. So, yeah, there's a lot of drama surrounding it, but if you look at it as an artwork, it is very interesting and impressive to me. And also, if you get way too into it and, like, watch, like, every single one of her videos, then you'll notice, well, you'd have to know, like, art history references, but she's referencing modern art as well in a lot of these. She references Video Flag Z at one point. But yeah, so that is cinema and also just a general overview of digital arts. A bit of a shorter one because it's only one chapter this time, but I cannot wait to see you guys in class and show you a bunch of weird videos, because when else do I get to hold a bunch of people captive and make them watch weird artsy stuff? So buckle your seatbelts because you're in for a good one. Have a good one. Have a good night. See you guys in class. Bye.